The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was the loudest thing in the room. It sounded like a bone snapping. My husband, Lucian, stood over me, his hand resting heavily on the back of my chair. It wasn't a comforting touch. It was a corral, a physical barrier reminding me that I was trapped. Across the mahogany table of our high-rise apartment, the woman I used to call my best friend, Morella, sipped sparkling water and checked her watch. She looked bored, as if destroying my life was just another item on her Tuesday to-do list, right between a Pilates class and a manicure. "Sign this quietly, Taryn," Lucian whispered, his breath hot against my ear. It smelled of the scotch he'd been drinking to celebrate his victory before the game was even over. "Don't make a scene. Don't cry. Just sign the papers, take the settlement, and get out. If you argue, I release the photos. You know I will." He tapped the signature line with a manicured fingernail. I looked at the document, the dissolution of marriage and asset transfer agreement. It was 80 pages of legal jargon designed to strip me of everything I had built. It gave him the house. It gave him the cars. But most importantly, it gave him full, uncontested ownership of Helix, the tech firm we had started in our garage 5 years ago. The firm that was about to go public, the firm that was 90% my code and 10% his sales pitch. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. He thought I was trembling because I was terrified. He thought the moisture in my eyes was heartbreak. He was wrong. I was trembling because of the adrenaline flooding my system. And I wasn't crying, I was fighting back a hysterical laugh. Because Lucian, in his arrogance, in his rush to push me out the door so he could move Morella in, had made a fatal error. He had sent me the digital draft at 2 a.m., demanding I print it and sign it by morning. He assumed I would be too drunk on misery to read it. He assumed I wouldn't dare touch it. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the paper. "Good girl," Morella said, her voice like jagged glass wrapped in silk. "Make it legible, sweetie." I pressed the pen to the paper. I didn't just sign my name, I signed his death warrant. Because 12 hours ago, while he was asleep in her bed, I had opened the digital file. I didn't change the settlement amount. I didn't ask for the house. I simply went to page 79, clause 14, subsection C, the indemnification and liability section, and I added a single 40-word sentence. I signed the paper with a flourish. I capped the pen and slid the document across the table to him. Lucian snatched it up. He didn't look at page 79. He flipped straight to the back, checked my signature, and grinned. It was a shark's grin, all teeth and predation. "Done," he said, tossing the folder to Morella. "Get out, Taryn. You have an hour to pack your bags." I stood up. My legs felt like steel springs. I looked at him, then at her, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Enjoy the company, Lucian," I said softly. "You earned every bit of it." I walked out of that apartment, leaving behind my clothes, my jewelry, and my furniture. I walked out with nothing but my purse and the knowledge that in exactly 48 hours, Lucian's entire world was going to burn, and he had just signed the permission slip to let me light the match. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand who Lucian was. When I met him, he was charming. Not in a goofy, lovable way, but in a way that felt like a spotlight. When Lucian focused on you, you felt like the only person in the universe. I was a back-end developer, comfortable in the dark, weaving complex tapestries of code. He was the front man. He could sell ice to a polar bear, and he could sell my software to investors who didn't even know how to turn on a computer. We were a team, or so I thought. We built Helix from nothing. I wrote the proprietary algorithm that predicted market trends with frightening accuracy. It was my baby. I worked 20-hour days. I ruined my eyesight. I developed chronic back pain. I poured my soul into that code. Lucian poured the drinks at networking events. For 5 years, it worked. We were the power couple of the tech scene. But as Helix grew, Lucian changed. The money didn't make him generous. It made him paranoid. He started talking about legacy and image. He started buying suits that cost more than my first car. And he started hiring consultants. That's when Morella came in. She was brought in as a brand strategist. She was stunning, intelligent, and ruthless. I liked her at first. I thought we were friends. We went to lunch. I confided in her about my insecurities, about how overwhelmed I felt by the sudden scaling of the company. I told her I sometimes felt like I didn't belong in this new glitzy world Lucian was building. I didn't know I was handing her ammunition. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow poison. Lucian started coming home late. He smelled of perfume, her perfume. He stopped asking my opinion on business decisions. Then came the gaslighting. "You're working too hard, Taryn," he'd say. "You're sounding irrational. Maybe you should take a sabbatical. Morella agrees you seem unstable." Unstable. That was the word they used to pave the road to my execution. I found out the truth 3 weeks before the signing. I had come into the office early on a Sunday to patch a server bug. I walked past Lucian's office. The door was ajar. I heard them. "The IPO launches next month," Lucian was saying. "If she's still on the board, the investors might get skittish. She looks tired, Lucian. She looks weak." "I know," Lucian replied. His voice didn't hold an ounce of defense for me. "But she owns 50%. We need her to sign it over voluntarily. If we fire her, she could sue and freeze the assets." "So make her voluntary," Morella laughed. "Break her. Use the photos from the Vegas party, the ones where she's dancing on the table. With a little editing, we can make it look like she was high. Threaten her reputation. She's shy. She's terrified of public scrutiny. She'll fold." "And the money?" "Give her a payout, a pittance, enough to go away. We need that capital for the expansion in Tokyo." I stood in the hallway, my hand frozen on the doorframe. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought they would hear it. They weren't just having an affair. They were plotting a corporate coup. They were going to steal my life's work, paint me as a drug-addled incompetent, and cast me aside. I didn't burst in. I didn't scream. I backed away, silently, and walked out of the building. I sat in my car and shook for an hour. Then the shaking stopped, and the cold set in. I am a coder. I deal in logic, if-then statements. If an error occurs, then execute the failsafe. Lucian had introduced a critical error into my life. It was time to right the patch. I spent the next 2 weeks playing the part. I stopped wearing makeup. I let my hair go messy. I cried at dinner. I let them think their plan was working. I let them think I was cracking under the pressure. Then Lucian made his move. He presented the separation agreement. He told me he wanted to save me from the stress of the business. He told me he had found the photos that didn't exist until he doctored them, and that he would protect me by keeping them private, provided I signed over my shares and agreed to a quiet divorce. He gave me 24 hours. That night, in the guest room, I opened the file he emailed me. It was a PDF, but he, in his infinite laziness, hadn't locked the editing permissions. He assumed I was too tech illiterate regarding legal documents or too emotionally wrecked. I read every word. It was brutal. It stripped me of my intellectual property. It contained a non-compete clause that banned me from coding for 5 years. It offered a settlement of $500,000 for a company worth $200 million. I could have gone to a lawyer. I could have fought it in court for years. But that would have exposed the company, tanked the stock price, and left me with nothing but legal bills. I didn't want a settlement. I wanted justice. I went to Clause 14. Clause 14 was the liabilities and debts section. It stated that the company, Helix, would assume all debts incurred by the business. I knew something about Lucian that he didn't know I knew. To fund his lavish lifestyle and Morella's consulting fees, he had been cooking the books. He had taken out massive, high-interest loans from offshore lenders under the company's name, hiding them in shell accounts. He was planning to use the IPO money to pay them back before the audit. If I signed the document as it was, I would be absolved of those debts, but I'd lose the company. If I refused to sign, he'd release the fake photos and ruin us both. I needed a third option. I needed him to take the debt, but I needed to keep the control. I edited the document. I kept the font identical. I kept the formatting perfect. I found the paragraph regarding personal guarantees. It originally read, "The signatory, Taryn, is released from all personal guarantees regarding company debt." I changed it. I added a condition, a logic gate. The signatory, Taryn, is released from all personal guarantees regarding company debt. Furthermore, the assignee, Lucian, hereby assumes full, personal, and unlimited liability for all debts, loans, and financial obligations labeled under Project Chimera and any offshore accounts associated with the Cayman Ledger, regardless of whether said debts were disclosed to the board. Additionally, should the assignee be found in breach of fiduciary duty or engaged in an undisclosed relationship with a vendor or contractor prior to the date of signing, all Class A voting shares shall immediately revert to the signatory, along with full executive control, while the debt obligation remains solely with the assignee. It was a mouthful. It was legal poison. Project Chimera was the folder name where he hid the illegal loans. I knew he wouldn't read it. It was buried in the middle of a paragraph about tax codes on page 79. Lucian never read the tax codes. He paid people to do that. And he hadn't sent this version to his lawyers yet. He sent it to me to sign first, planning to forward the signed copy to them in the morning to expedite the filing. He was arrogant. He was rushing. I printed the edited version on our home printer, replaced the paper in the tray so it looked untouched, and brought it to the table the next morning. Which brings us back to the signing. The 48 hours after I left the apartment were the longest of my life. I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. I turned off my phone. I waited. The timeline was specific. The IPO was scheduled to launch on Friday. Today was Wednesday. On Thursday morning, I turned my phone back on. It immediately blew up. 17 missed calls from Lucian. 12 texts. "Where are you? The lawyers are asking for the hard copy. Taryn, pick up." I texted back, "I left the signed copy on the table. You have it." He didn't reply. He must have found it. He must have scanned it and sent it to his legal team. They were probably skimming it, looking for the signature, not reading the fine print of a document they thought they wrote. Friday morning, the day of the IPO. I put on my best suit. I did my hair. I walked into the headquarters of Helix. The receptionist, a girl named Sarah, who Lucian had hired because she was pretty, looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Mrs. Vane," she stammered, "I thought Mr. Vane said you were unwell. He said you were no longer with the company." "Lucian says a lot of things, Sarah," I smiled. "Is the board meeting in the main conference room?" "Yes, but you can't." I walked past her. I took the elevator to the top floor. My badge still worked. He hadn't deactivated it yet, probably too busy popping champagne. I pushed open the double glass doors to the conference room. The room went silent. Lucian was at the head of the table, standing in front of a projection screen showing the pre-market rising stock price. Morella was sitting to his right, looking smug. The entire board of directors was there, along with the bank representatives and the legal team. Lucian froze. His face went pale, then red. "Taryn," he hissed, "what the hell are you doing here? Security." "I don't think you want to do that, Lucian," I said, my voice calm, projecting to the back of the room. "You signed the papers," he snapped, holding up a file. "You're out. You have no rights here. You're trespassing." "I did sign the papers," I agreed. I walked toward the table. "And did you read the papers you submitted to the SEC and the bank this morning? The papers that are now legally binding public record?" Lucian frowned. He looked at his lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson. Henderson looked confused. He opened his folder. "Mr. Henderson," I said, addressing the lawyer, "could you please turn to page 79, clause 14, subsection C?" Henderson flipped the pages. The room was deathly quiet. Lucian's eyes darted between me and the lawyer. He started to sweat. Henderson found the page. He adjusted his glasses. He read. His face lost all color. He looked up at Lucian with an expression of pure horror. "What?" Lucian demanded. "What does it say?" Lucian whispered, Did you read the draft before you filed it?"
Of course I did. It's the standard separation agreement. No, Henderson said, it's not. Henderson began to read aloud. The assignee hereby assumes full, personal, and unlimited liability for all debts, loans, and financial obligations labeled under Project Chimera. Lucian flinched as if he'd been slapped. Morella dropped her pen. Henderson continued, his voice shaking. Additionally, should the assignee be found engaged in an undisclosed relationship with a vendor or contractor prior to the date of signing, all Class A voting shares shall immediately revert to the signatory. That's fake, Lucian screamed. He lunged for the paper. She forged it. That's not what I wrote. It's what you signed, I said, stepping closer. And it's what you filed. You countersigned it, Lucian. I have the digital logs, I have the metadata showing the file was edited on your home computer, printed and then signed by you. You accepted the terms. You tricked me, he roared. I negotiated, I corrected. Now about that Project Chimera debt. Since you just personally accepted liability for it, and since I know for a fact that those accounts contain about $4 million in high-interest loans from, let's call them non-traditional lenders, I imagine the bank representatives here might have some questions. I turned to the bank reps. They were already typing furiously on their laptops. Mr. Vane, the lead banker said, his voice like ice, does Helix have undisclosed offshore debt? No, Lucian lied. It's a lie. She's crazy. It's in the document you just filed, I pointed out. If it's a lie, you just committed perjury and securities fraud. If it's true, you're insolvent. Lucian looked at me. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. He looked like a trapped rat. And, regarding the morality clause, I continued, pulling a folder from my bag, I have photos too, Lucian. Not fake ones, real ones. Dates, timestamps, hotel receipts matching Morella's consulting invoices. I tossed the folder onto the table. Pictures of them in Cabo, in Paris, in our bed. You've been sleeping with a contractor while siphoning company funds to pay her, I said, which, per the agreement you just signed, triggers the immediate reversion of the company to me. Morella stood up. I'm leaving, she announced. Sit down, Morella, I said sharply. You're part of the audit now. She sat. The next hour was a blur of chaos. The board voted immediately to remove Lucian as CEO pending an investigation. Security was called, not for me, but to escort Lucian out of the building. As two large guards grabbed his arms, Lucian looked back at me. He was crying, real tears this time. Taryn, please, he begged. The lenders, if I don't pay them, they'll kill me. You can't leave me with the debt. It's our debt. I leaned in close so only he could hear. Sign this quietly, I whispered, echoing his words from 2 days ago. Don't make a scene. Just get out. He was dragged out screaming. The aftermath was extensive. Because Lucian had legally accepted personal liability for the debt, Helix was shielded. The IPO went ahead, slightly delayed, but successful. The story hit the news, but the spin was that I, the heroic founder, had purged the corruption from the company. The stock soared. Lucian wasn't so lucky. The Project Chimera debt wasn't just money owed to banks. It was money owed to loan sharks in Macau. When the assets he thought he was getting, the house, the cars, the stocks, were frozen by the SEC investigation I triggered, he had no way to pay. He declared bankruptcy. He lost the apartment. He lost his reputation. And Morella, she turned on him the second the money dried up. She testified against him in the fraud trial to cut a deal for herself. She admitted everything, the embezzlement, the affair, the plan to frame me. She avoided jail time but was blacklisted from every firm in the city. She's currently working as an assistant manager at a retail chain in Ohio. As for Lucian, he is currently serving 4 years for securities fraud. But I hear his biggest problem isn't the prison guards. It's the people waiting for him when he gets out. The ones who want their $4 million. I kept the pen. The cheap, plastic ballpoint pen I used to sign that agreement. I keep it framed in my office right next to the CEO of the Year award. Sometimes, when I have a difficult contract to review, I look at that pen. It reminds me of the most important lesson in business and in life. Always read the fine print, especially the last line.